All right, for some reason it started to transcribe, so I'm going to hopefully try to turn that off because I do not want transcription. So, second. All right, perfect. So it is January 14th. This is a meeting of our audit compliance and governance meeting. It's starting off this morning. We don't currently have quorum, but we're going to begin.
Joanna should be hopping on.
Oh, perfect. And Joanna will be joining shortly. So there are, as mentioned earlier before the start of the meeting, there are no resolutions for today's meeting. I would just ask people, obviously, if you can, but we have a small group, so I think it's less of an issue here to mute your microphones. If you have any questions, you don't have to worry about the chat box. Feel free to just chime on in. We are going to record the meeting, and for the purpose of that recording, for our broader audience, I would just ask that the first time if you speak, if you could just state your name. Today, we're going to really just be focused on, actually now you should, well, we don't have, maybe if it's okay with Matt and Lonnie, I'll handle maybe some of these first few slides. We don't really need to do a call to order without quorum. What we could do when Joanna joins us, we can call and come back to the call to order. But I will ask if anyone has public comments, if there's anyone from the public here today. Okay. We'll come back to the approval of the minutes, and what we can maybe do is start with our legislative process, and I'm going to hand it over to James, who's been really leading on that process.
Good morning, everyone. James Santos, Legislative Liaison. I just wanted to walk you through the legislative process, which is in adherence to our policy board process memo that was created 2 years ago to provide greater transparency and insight into the legislative process so we could solicit more feedback from Green Bank staff and board members. So this, in terms of preparation for the session that we're currently in that started on January 8th, pre-session, we did do meetings with senior staff. We did outreach to see if there was any obstacles or hurdles that we needed to overcome, any legislation that needed to be passed. The outcome of that was that there was not going to be anything proactive that the Green Bank was going to be pushing for this year that was going to be originated out of the Green Bank. Therefore, we didn't need a ACG or board review and approval last October and December through the board for legislative approval of any agenda. With that being said, this session is very unique. It is a long session, and there are a significant amount of proposed bills that have been introduced thus far, and no committees have introduced anything or given any idea of where they're going on anything. So it is a very reactive legislative session thus far. So where we are right now is we have an interactive bill tracker that is online. I will be forwarding that out to all board members, all staff, like I did last year. We are starting our weekly update meetings, our internal, which is with Brian and Mackie every Tuesday and Friday. In terms of policy development, that'll happen on a rolling, ongoing basis, depending on what is introduced and how we react to that, and we will follow our process. Public hearings will start sometime in the next 2 weeks. January 17th is the deadline for proposed bills, the General Assembly. So then after that, you start seeing some public hearings start to pop out. And then the weekly update meetings those are external meetings with liaisons from DEEP and Department of Ag and DAS, just in OPM, Joanna mainly from that division, just to keep in line about what's going on. Brian, you want to add anything?
No. Next slide.
Yeah, please. Okay. So here's where we are right now. So the session started.
Hey, James.
Yeah.
Hey, James, sorry.
Yeah.
The weekly external update meetings, are those like just like check-in screening? What do you guys do? Do you like actual bill screening or just check in about whether those agencies have priorities or basically making sure we're not getting our wires crossed?
Yeah, no, it's probably all of that. So most importantly, it's just talking about what we're hearing on the ground, what we know is coming out, how we're going to be aligned on it. A lot of times, they will be privy to a bill that's being introduced or a forum that's happening in the next couple of weeks. We may want to be a part of that, so then that information is shared, and vice versa. We do screen particular bills as well that come up in committees, mainly the Environment Committee. But it is really just a touch base, and anything that we find out is reported back. And we run it through internally here and then give our feedback.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we don't make, there's no like commitments in that meeting. That's all run back through the internal process with Mackie and,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And since, so sometimes depending on the piece of legislation, I mean, Mackie and Brian and I will discuss the legislative strategy, whether or not we are going to testify in person for this bill, or we're just going to submit, or we're going to stay neutral, due to the fact that it's a land war between two different factions, and we don't want to get in the middle.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to get the flavor of what that was sort of for.
So the legislative session started January 8th and it's June 4th, so it's a long session, so it's a budget year. Budget process begins in February. Where we are right now is the proposed bill phase of the session. So as of last night, you can see the House introduced 118 proposed bills and the Senate has 529. So that's, 650 roughly. So I'd say 630 of those will probably die. Those will be hopefully rolled into or committee bills once those are introduced over the next 2 to 3 weeks. The session's been a little slow to start. A lot of the committees have not even had organizational meetings yet, especially the committees we care about. The Environment Committee has a new chair, which is John Michael Parker from Durham and Madison. So he's brand new. Rick Lopes is from New Britain. He's the Senate Chair of Environment, so that maintains the same from last year. Andre Baumgartner is the Vice Chair of the Environment Committee, and he is also going to be leading the efforts for the revival of the Green Monster bill from last session. So that is going to be the big speaker's bill, environmental bill from last session. The Energy and Technology Committee had a very long organizational meeting last week. Usually they last about 15 seconds. This one lasted well over an hour. Went around the horn. Everyone spoke about their priorities, and what was referenced a lot was the expansion of natural gas, nuclear, and hydropower. It was all about load, and it tied everything to the expansion of AI data centers here in the state of Connecticut. So that is going to be on the front burner for every issue that comes out.
And Matt, to your point about how do we deal with legislative items, like, you think of like natural gas, nuclear, hydropower, like we may have to make a decision. Okay, where do we play in this? Like, for example, like with natural gas, we have an ability to do that. The environmentalists are vehemently opposed to it. I don't know where deep is, so it's like, all right, maybe that's not one we would join into that fray. There was conversations about expanding our scope for us to be able to potentially finance nuclear. That would fundamentally change the Connecticut Green Bank model. That's not something I don't think we would want to do. So these are the kind of conversations we have, because we're like, okay, we may get asked at some public meeting about this. So it's kind of like, okay, let's make sure Brian knows. Let's make sure we have a consensus on how we kind of respond to that, so we're not, caught off guard. There was an item where a legislator was like saying, hey, the Home Energy Solutions Program, maybe that'd be something best run at the Green Bank. We're like, that's a grant-based program, doesn't really fit into our financing model approach. That wouldn't make sense. How do we handle that with the cast of characters involved to make sure they understand that's not our idea and that's not something that so it's kind of like, it's almost what James does is help the entire organization, not get caught, surprised. So we're like, okay, we know the issue's coming up, we know it's out there, what is our position on it?
Yeah.
And like the last one is like the big one, right? Grid affordability. We saw throughout the summer and through the election season, the public benefit charge issue continually coming up. Like, how do we handle that? The Connecticut Green Bank, we're such a small sliver of that, but we'll make the story sometimes because we're we're in that. So it's like, okay, how do we address that? Even though we're such a small portion of that, is our approach is continue to just demonstrate all the great things that we do? Is there something else we should be doing? You have to have a conversation. All right, do we want to make a concession on that? And our response is like, because we're such a small part of it, and because we're having a multiplier effect, I think we came back internally like, no, that wouldn't make sense, and we obviously wouldn't ever want to do anything unilaterally. And then it becomes like this huge food fight. So we're like, let's just, we took the approach. We're going to just continue to just demonstrate our model and leave it there. Is that fair, James?
This is Lonnie. I just want to just for a sec. The whole this talks about mislabeling. In the public benefit situation. The nuclear situation was not a public benefit situation. It was a supply situation. They were shutting down the nuclear power plants. Dominion was leaving the state. That's what that was. So I think, as we begin to address some of these issues, we need to relabel them for our own purposes as we are asked about them, because that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a fair part. I feel like framing and getting a base understanding, pun intended, is important. I agree. Oh, and we got Joanna too. So maybe what we could do before we go to the next slide is we can go back to the approval of the minutes and the call to order, if that's okay. Okay, and Joanna, you haven't
apologize for being late.
Oh, no worries, and you haven't missed much. James, and I know we talked to you a lot, so we were just kind of giving an update on our legislative process and kind of a briefing on this being a long session, some of the major items. So that's something we've already kind of talked about. So you didn't miss anything too exciting.
Yes, you did,
Perfect.
Joanna.
You did. So,
I'm sure you handled it well, James.
Crushed it.
At one point, a little tear came to my eye. So at 8:48, I would like to call the ACG meeting to order. And the first, and we already went to the public comments, but just to confirm, there were no public comments when we requested earlier. And then what I would request if we can have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our October 8th, 2024 meeting.
So moved, Lonnie.
All right, perfect. All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, perfect. Our minutes are approved from our October 8th meeting. And what we'll do now is, went through the legislative process, and maybe we could do you want to jump at anything else on the session process, James, that you'd want to talk about before the next slide?
Yeah, no, I would just want to say, so where it says energy space we'll focus on, the expansion of natural gas is really, that's tailored towards the expansion of fuel cells in Connecticut, right? And nuclear is the small modular reactors. So it's not the buyout of, or the PPA that we have with Millstone. This is for the procurement of small modular reactors in the state of Connecticut, which no one seems to know how high in expense that will actually go at this point. But there is a lot of interest on the Energy Committee pursuing that. And then hydropower has always been an issue that's been put to the forefront. And we were on the hydropower task force last year. DEEP has a procurement now up to 20 megawatts for hydropower. So we're hoping that'll roll out this year. But we're interested to see what the Energy Committee is thinking for expansion on that. And we haven't met with the energy chairs yet, but we should in the next 2 weeks. So we'll be able to find out more on that. In terms of grid affordability, Brian really spoke to this one already, but Johnny Dock, who's the former chief of staff to Governor Lamont, is now going to lead the policy working group on the grid affordability and what issues are going to come out this legislative session. And as Brian said, over the summer, the Republicans did put out their 6 pillars to save money for ratepayers. I've only seen 2 of those be introduced. One is to increase the Bureau commissioners from 3 to 5, and then to shift the system benefit charge from the electric bills to the state budget. So several bills have been introduced thus far on that. What we're doing is making sure that those bills never see the light of day. The Governor Lamont in the State of the State said that that's not going to save a dime's worth on anything. So we should get real and figure out some solutions here. And Steinberg and Needleman have said the same. So I think we're in a good place for making sure that those two misguided pillars don't proceed.
Wow, how do you really feel, James?
There you go. This isn't being recorded, is it?
Exactly. No, it's a,
James, there was one last night too that came out to appoint the Consumer Council and the AG to PURA as the 2 additional members.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which I think would be a no-go considering Consumer Council needs to have that independent perspective in order to protect the consumer. So it seems certainly a conflict of interest there.
Did that bill come out today?
It was last night. It was on the list of bills last night, late.
Interesting. Okay. All right, we go to the next slide. And
It'll be quite a session.
yeah, and quite a session because of this bill. It's perfect timing, Joanna. So, when I started the conversation, it was like the Green Bank was not going to be proactive in any legislation that originated from the Green Bank. But our number one priority this session is going to be supporting Joanna, OPM, and the governor's office in the passage of the governor's resilience legislation. It was Senate Bill 11 in the last legislative session. Made it to the Senate calendar, not a problem, and then ran out of time and was never passed out of the Senate. This year, it is now Senate Bill 9. It's going to originate in the Environment Committee again. It's good that Joanna and Brian are both on. They had a meeting with the governor last night to discuss the bill in detail. So I could actually just pass this off to Brian first if you want to speak to that meeting, very high level.
No, why don't, if Joanna's okay with it, why don't we start with Joanna and I'll just weigh in from there.
Yeah, Joanna, would you like to speak to the bill and the highlights of that and what you think is going to happen in the next week or so on this one?
Sure. The many provisions from last year are going to be moving forward. The part where the local COG and state plans are coordinated with each other. The localities have to perform a vulnerability assessment as part of their POCD. PURA, DPH, and DEEP will have to update their water supply and sewage regulations in concurrence with climate projections, particularly related to flood and drought. We'll have to, the municipalities will be developing additional GIS capabilities, including culvert and bridge mapping, and being able to share that with the emergency management agencies and the transportation agencies. And then there's some new provisions. We got rid of some old provisions that weren't necessary, and like the building code changes, which I guess I shouldn't have said that wasn't necessary. Those would still be an improvement, but it was sort of an unnecessary step when we're updating the building code now to the latest standard at this very moment. But then we also added some additional provisions, a flood disclosure law similar to New York and New Jersey, so that folks know if they're in a flood zone, they know if the property has been impacted by a flood before, and also a new provision for renters. There's only existing disclosure for renters related to lead-based paint and mold, which are obviously important, but the renters should know if they're in a flood zone and if the property owner has any flood insurance. Then there's some additional insurance and banking notifications so that people know that their traditional homeowners insurance does not cover them in a flood, and that they should be making sure that they're weighing their options with respect to that. So those are the main provisions. The resilience improvement districts, where I think the Green Bank is such an incredible partner on this, is basically a financing mechanism for the large scale climate infrastructure that municipalities could use to fund the resilience opportunity areas that UConn-CIRCA has identified. So the governor was supportive of the other provisions moving forward and the new provisions moving forward. And we expect to be rolling out the full new package officially with the governor's budget, concurrent with the governor's budget address on February 5th, and a neat little fact sheet for all of your reading needs, and working with the Senate closely to develop it. One interesting faction will be that Senator Gordon, who is the ranking member on P&D, has also proposed a bill that's using provisions from the bill last year. That's SB 314. So it'll be interesting to hear what his perspective is. I guess I'm a little bit hesitant and wary of splintering, but there's also an opportunity to bring all the pieces together. So, Brian, did I miss anything?
No. I was just going to say what a privilege it was to sit there and watch Joanna really step-by-step methodically work through with the governor each section of the bill. And we all know the governor is super inquisitive. So as Joanna was doing that, she really called upon the leaders of the other agencies, insurance, banking, environmental protection, consumer protection. So, everyone was there in full force to support the bill. I think, like in general, all the new aspects of the bill are really, really important. All the disclosures, all the old stuff from the green bank's perspective is important because it's providing access to capital to end users so that they can become more resilient. As a board, we're all familiar with us expanding our smart e-loan and our commercial property assessed clean energy financing products, which are really for individual property owners. It's clear that in the case of resiliency, we need community-wide investment. And if we can get to a community-wide investment, then the insurance industry and reductions in premiums and all those sorts of things can inure as a result of those types of investments. So it was good to hear Commissioner Mays talking about the importance of the community rating system. Joanna, Patrick, I mean, that's what we're going to bring to this, is another element of community finance. So I think when we think about this policy, when it passes, it will really become foundational from a programmatic perspective with Lee and her leadership of the environmental infrastructure team, because then we really have a tool for community-wide environmental infrastructure investment. So it's fun. It's going to be a fun session. We've got a great team led by Joanna, and we're going to be right there helping and leading in whatever she needs.
This is
I'm glad you
Lonnie.
brought
Joanna, can I just ask a quick question? Like,
Of course.
I hate to admit I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I know one of the things towns are quiet about, and I'm sure you've got it in there, are, how outdated the sewage treatment plants are becoming and how they need to be elevated because the sound is rising, and that there are leaks happening during, major downpours and stuff. And towns are very quick. Suddenly you'll see a beach is closed, but nobody really is talking about it. And I'm just wondering, is there a provision in there to kind of really take a look at, they're ancient facilities now when you look at them.
Yes, sir. I guess it would not directly calling out water treatment plants specifically, but with making sure that DEEP and DPH and Pure are updating those regulations, they would probably be calling out and saying that you have to make sure that your discharge can accommodate increased flood levels, or maybe you need increased holding tanks to deal with the stormwater or separating the stormwater systems. As we see in Hartford too, the combined sewer overflow systems are just devastating from a public health and infrastructure perspective. So I'm hoping through updated regulations and then updated local plannings and then connecting the local land use plans with the local hazard mitigation plans that's in the bill, that we're sort of creating a system of resilience, as opposed to, I think, as resilience and adaptation are starting to evolve, it has been, in some cases, it has to be very industry specific or sector specific. But I think the heart of the bill is creating a resilience system so that we have that redundancy. We're connecting capital and land use planning. We're connecting state dollars to local action. We're increasing awareness for local capital planning and those types of things. So while it doesn't call it out specifically, I think it would help that forward.
That sounds great. I mean, I know that elevation is expensive, and I've had some of our people in Branford confide in me, oh God, when we do that, this is going to really cost it. That's really a rebuild. That's not just improving, that's a total rebuild. So I'm glad you're addressing that.
Yeah, and from drinking water perspective too, we're having, the increased cyanobacteria too, due to the rising temperatures of the water, and that most water treatment plants don't have that tertiary treatment to deal with the bacteria. So hopefully that would be something that they would be looking at as well, which definitely not cheap. But Brian, I'm glad you brought up insurance too, because I'm hoping through the advisory committee with Commissioner Mays and the team that we can really reinforce the issue of flood insurance, and then being able to push the industry to develop that public-private funding mechanism that would basically be a much more sustainable product, as we've discussed. So I hope we can really push from that angle.
Any other questions on Senate Bill 9? And obviously, it's very timely when you look at U.S. affairs, whether it's the flooding that we saw this summer in Oxford Seymour to what's happening to California and to other places. So, resiliency and insurance are obviously on the front of a lot of people's minds. Next slide. Green Monster bill. James, you want to give a quick?
Yeah. So the Senate's big bill that we're interested in, Senate Bill 9, as we just discussed, and in the House, it's going to be the Green Monster Bill 2.0 version of this. So as of right now, the bill is exactly the way it was in the House last year. They haven't made any modifications to it. They're going to begin negotiations in the next couple of weeks. That's going to be led by Representative Andre Baumgartner, who's the Vice Chair of Environment. He's leading the negotiations, but if you saw in the press over the fall, it was Joe Gresco moved over to the Speaker's office as a deputy speaker, and he was going to be leading the efforts on that. So I would imagine it's going to be a two-pronged negotiation strategy here between Gresco and Baumgartner. But the bill is right now identical to last year. Nothing has been added thus far. There is the formulation of a solar canopy strategic plan. There's nature-based solutions, which they're seeking out a definition for what is nature-based solutions. That was held up last year, and the potential applications for that. Conservation development plans so we can develop sustainability and climate resiliency in all their long-term planning. From what I understand, the Connecticut Clean Economy Council actually is in existence, but it actually just reinstitutes it and makes it effective. So it's just basically giving it a shot in the arm. The Green Bank does have an appointment to the Connecticut Clean Economy Council. So whatever happens there will be a part of that. The Pura dashboard, which is interesting. So that just basically puts everything online, easily accessible, all ratepayer funded clean energy programs, where it's going, how much it's costing. So there's full transparency on that. And then it asks Pura to do an energy storage report on progress and steps to increase deployment. And they're supposed to do that every 3 years. So it'll start in 2026 and then 2029, 2032.
Yeah. No, and this is one of those bills where, it's not coming out of DEEP or OPM where we'd probably be more inclined to kind of coordinate. It really is kind of like an environmental goodie bag or wish list. And there's so the question is, what does this look like when it finally evolves? So this is one of those classic bills where we'll be monitoring closely from the sidelines and just making sure that we don't see that we it doesn't in any way negatively impact the ecosystem to encourage clean energy deployment, which it would not in any way. So we're just kind of monitoring the bill, and that's where we would handle that one.
This bill will be an absolute aircraft carrier. So, I mean, out of the 600 bills that were introduced, the highest percentage are environmental bills. So my guess is that everyone sees this as the bill that's going to move forward because it's got Speaker Ritter endorsement. You're going to see this bill probably be the longest drafted bill in the legislative session. So it's just maintaining focus on this one as it progresses.
And a lot of the environmentalists were upset with the real or perceived belief that no major legislation was passed last legislative session. So I think there's going to be a really big push to get something like this done. So it will be interesting to follow throughout the session. Any questions on not only the Green Monster bill, but just before we move on to legislative reporting, which is just a quick slide, any other kind of overall impressions, thoughts for the legislative session?
Not doing great, are we, Renee?
I think the fun of all right. So with that, why don't we move forward?
This will be the quickest slide in history. So this is our statutory reporting. So the Green Bank is in compliance for all of our 2024 statutory filings. We got in our quarterly cash flow, HR, open CT checkbook last March. Board meetings have been updated. 1-123 was submitted. scarf notice, and annual report have all been submitted on time. So we're in full compliance on that. A couple of big changes from 2023 and 2024 to this year was that REFA, we had that removed last year. That was a Green Bank initiative. It was left on the books, even though the program was eliminated. So we were able to remove that, but we did file this year just in case, as there was some overlaps. We wanted to make sure we're in compliance. So we submitted REFA for the last time. RSIP sunsetted in 2021. So the last filing we made in that was 2022. So we didn't need to do one in 2024 because it's every other year. And the board diversity, we received word from the Secretary of State's office through Chris Bazin at CI that we were not required to submit board diversity. So as of right now, we are in full compliance for statutory reporting.
Yeah, and let's thank James for his leadership on getting all these done, and thank Matt Rinelli for, coming up with kind of this, live document that has everything in one place, where we have kind of like real-time heads up on when things are filed, so we don't miss any deadlines, which we've been great for many, many years now. With that, just the last slide that we had here was just our current board membership. We like to just have this included in our ACG meeting updates. The one position that is still open that we've mulled around a few names is Laura Hoydick. That's the one position we like to fill. We had one individual in mind, Matt Rinelli. You may know him. He broke our heart and said no. So
I am gonna go visit him personally then. That is not acceptable. Whose appointment is that? Like what's the role? Laura's appointment? Is it
so that is through the House Minority Leader. So that would be Vinny. So
okay.
He would appoint that one.
Okay.
And it's the Financing Renewable Energy Investment Fund appointment.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Brian.
Okay. Yeah, that would have been good. Just going back to the other notice, it has become really regular, so that's great. But and it seems like we've done this, and it looks like we're down to a minimum. I was going to say, any other things we want to take off our plate, but it looks like those things we probably want to all keep on our plate. But I would just say to you and James, if there's reporting we are doing that you guys think is, superfluous in the sense that it's the same every year or whatever, and not helpful to us, it would be good to know. And it's always something you can ask the legislature to lighten our load. But I think other than this, all of those, I think we need to make. So just always looking, for a while, it's like it seemed like we had a lot more than that. So it looks like we're whittling it down.
Agreed. Yeah. Like some like the REFA one, for example, was completely for something that wasn't even, there was no fund. It was just a matter of just kind of getting the cleanup and saying, hey, this is a technical fix. And then and then it's like you get to the point where it's the end of session where you're explaining to them that it's just a technical fix, but like, are we going to trade a chit to get this technical fix?
Yeah, right.
Where, like harass someone where we're trying to get something like material done. So kudos to James for finally getting it removed.
Yep.
All right. And then with that, I would, unless there's any other questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Thank you, Matt, Joanna, Lonnie, and everyone else.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Have a good day.
Stop sharing.
Stop recording too, right?